At 6:45 every morning, before most teachers even unlocked their classrooms, Daniel Carter was already inside the school building. He pushed a worn-out mop slowly across the hallway floor. The tiles reflected the dim yellow lights above, and the smell of cleaning liquid filled the corridor. Daniel had been doing this for 7 years. Janitor, cleaner, sometimes office helper, sometimes tea runner, whatever the school needed. At 40 years old, his back hurt most mornings, but he never complained. Complaining didn't pay the bills. And more importantly, his daughter studied in this same school. That alone made every long day worth it. Daniel checked the clock on the wall. 7:28 a.m. Students would start coming in any minute. Almost automatically, his eyes shifted toward the main entrance. He wasn't waiting for everyone. He was waiting for her. A few minutes later, the crowd of students began walking through the gates, laughing, talking, phones in their hands. And then he saw her. Emily Carter, 18 years old, final year student, smart, confident, popular. She looked beautiful today, her long brown hair tied in a loose ponytail as she walked with her friends. For a moment, Daniel's tired face softened. A small, proud smile appeared. Without thinking, he stepped closer. "Emily, sweetheart." She froze. Her smile disappeared instantly. Emily looked around quickly, making sure none of her friends heard him. Then she rushed closer to him, whispering sharply, "Dad, please, not here." Daniel stopped mid-step. The warmth in his chest slowly cooled. Emily kept her voice low, but her words came fast. "How many times have I told you? Don't call me like that at school." Daniel lowered his eyes slightly. "I just wanted to say good morning," she sighed in frustration. Her friends were standing a few steps away, waiting. "It's embarrassing, okay?" she said quietly. That word always hit him harder than anything else. Embarrassing. Emily adjusted the strap of her backpack. "And please, don't tell people you're my dad here." Daniel stayed silent. He had heard this before, many times. People think you're just the janitor, and it's weird when they find out. Just the janitor. For a moment, Daniel's fingers tightened around the mop handle. But then he forced a small smile, the same smile he used every time his heart cracked a little. "All right," he said softly. Emily looked relieved. "Thanks." Then she quickly turned around and walked back to her friends. Within seconds, she was laughing again, blending into the crowd like nothing had happened. Daniel stood there alone in the hallway, watching her walk away. A teacher's voice suddenly snapped him back. "Daniel." He turned quickly. Standing near the office door was the school principal. Principal Margaret Blake, strict, cold, and known for humiliating staff in front of everyone. Her expression was already annoyed. "Why is the staff room still messy? I told you to clean it before teachers arrive." "Sorry, ma'am. I'll do it right away." "Then stop standing around." Daniel nodded politely. "Of course." He grabbed his cleaning cart and walked toward the staff room. But as he passed the courtyard window, he saw Emily again, laughing with her friends under the morning sun. For a brief moment, pride returned to his tired eyes. She was growing up well. She had friends, a future. And if the price of that future was him staying invisible, Daniel was ready to pay it. What he didn't know was that very soon, something unexpected was about to happen. Something that would shock the entire school. Because one day soon, in front of every student and teacher, Emily Carter would run straight toward him, tears streaming down her face, and hug him like she never had before. Daniel Carter had learned something over the years. The less he spoke at school, the easier things became for his daughter, so he stayed quiet. Invisible, just another janitor pushing a cart down the hallway. By 8:15 a.m., the school building was full of noise. Lockers slammed, students rushed to classes, and teachers walked around with coffee cups in their hands. Daniel moved through the corridors carefully, cleaning small messes before anyone complained. From time to time, he would see Emily passing by with her friends. Every time she noticed him, she looked away quickly. Daniel pretended not to notice, but inside, it always stung. Still, he told himself the same thing every day. She's young. She'll understand one day. During lunch break, Daniel was called into the principal's office. The moment he entered, Principal Margaret Blake didn't even look up from her laptop. "You're late with the paperwork again." Daniel stood near the door respectfully. "I finished cleaning the science lab first, ma'am." She sighed loudly, clearly irritated. "You're here to work, Daniel, not to decide priorities." "Sorry, ma'am." She finally looked at him. "And the teachers complained about the trash bins again. I'll empty them right away." Margaret shook her head. "Honestly, sometimes I wonder why I even keep you here." Daniel simply nodded. "Understood, ma'am." He had heard worse before. After leaving the office, he grabbed 2 large garbage bags and walked toward the courtyard. Students were sitting everywhere. Benches, stairs, grass, laughing, eating, talking. Daniel quietly started collecting trash. As he approached one of the benches, he heard a group of girls laughing. Emily's voice was among them. He slowed down slightly without meaning to. One of her friends pointed toward him. "Ah, that janitor is everywhere." Another girl giggled. "He's kind of creepy, always staring." Daniel lowered his eyes quickly and continued working. Then another friend asked casually, "Emily, doesn't he work here all day?" Emily shrugged. "Yeah. He's just staff. Just staff." Her words weren't cruel, but they were distant, cold, like he was just another stranger in the building. Daniel tied the garbage bag quietly and moved on. He told himself not to think about it, but his chest felt heavier than usual. That evening, after school ended, Daniel reached home before Emily. Their small apartment was simple but clean. He cooked dinner like he always did. Pasta tonight. Emily arrived around 6 p.m. She dropped her bag on the couch and grabbed a drink from the fridge. "Hey," Daniel said gently. "Hey." Her tone was casual but distracted. "Dinner's ready." They sat across from each other at the small table. For a few minutes, the only sound in the room was the clinking of forks. Then Daniel spoke carefully. "You looked happy with your friends today." Emily shrugged. "Yeah, normal day." Daniel hesitated. "I saw you during lunch." Her fork paused midair. Immediately, her expression tightened. "Dad," he realized the mistake instantly. "I was just cleaning nearby. You were watching us again?" Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried frustration. "I wasn't watching. I just happened to be there." Emily sighed deeply. "This is exactly why I told you not to come near us at school." Daniel felt a familiar ache inside his chest. "I'm sorry." She pushed her plate slightly away. "I just don't want people talking, okay?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Okay." Silence returned, heavy, uncomfortable. After dinner, Emily went to her room. Daniel stayed behind, washing dishes in the sink. His hands worked automatically, but his thoughts were somewhere else. He wondered if he had failed as a father. Maybe he should have worked somewhere else. Maybe things would have been easier for her. But despite everything, he still smiled whenever he saw her, because no matter how distant she became, Emily was still the little girl who once held his hand while walking to kindergarten. And Daniel Carter would never stop loving her. What neither of them knew was, the next day at school, something unexpected was about to happen. Something that would slowly begin to crack the wall Emily had built between them. Before we continue the story, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And if you ever loved someone with your pure heart, subscribe to this channel so you never miss the best stories. The next morning started like every other day. Daniel Carter arrived early, unlocking storage rooms and preparing the cleaning supplies before students entered the building. His routine rarely changed. Work quietly, stay out of the way, go home tired. But that morning felt heavier. Emily's words from the night before still echoed in his mind. "This is exactly why I told you not to come near us at school." Daniel shook the thought away and focused on his tasks. By mid-morning, the school was buzzing. Teachers rushed between classes while students crowded the hallways. Around 10:30 a.m., Daniel was cleaning near the staircase when a loud voice suddenly echoed from the main hallway. Who left this mess here? It was Principal Margaret Blake. Students immediately went quiet as she stormed toward the science corridor, clearly furious. Daniel walked quickly in that direction. A group of students stood outside the classroom looking nervous. Broken glass from a science project was scattered across the floor. Principal Blake's eyes scanned the group. Someone explain this. No one spoke. Her gaze suddenly stopped on Emily, who was standing near the front. You were in this class last period, right? Emily looked confused. Yes, but then why is this lab equipment broken? Emily shook her head. I didn't break it. Principal Blake crossed her arms. Well, someone did. A few students quietly whispered behind her. Emily's face turned pale. I swear, I didn't. Principal Blake cut her off. Enough. You'll stay after school and clean this entire lab. But I didn't do anything. Then you should have been more responsible while you were there. Daniel stood a few feet away, silently watching. His heart tightened. He knew that tone. When the principal decided something, no one could change her mind. Emily looked around, hoping someone would speak up. None of her friends did. They avoided eye contact. The hallway felt painfully quiet. For the first time, Daniel saw something he hadn't seen in a long time. Emily looked alone. Principal Blake turned toward Daniel. Well, why are you standing there? Clean this mess. Daniel nodded. Yes, ma'am. He grabbed a broom and carefully started sweeping the broken glass. Emily stood there for another moment before slowly walking away. As she passed him, their eyes met briefly. There was no anger in her expression this time, just frustration. And something else. Something that looked a little like hurt. For the first time in a long while, Emily Carter was beginning to understand what it felt like to be treated unfairly, and Daniel had a quiet feeling inside his chest. Maybe, just maybe, this moment would be the first crack in the wall between them. The final bell rang at 3:30 p.m., and students rushed out of the building like they always did. But Emily Carter stayed behind. The science lab was silent now. Sunlight came through the windows as dust floated in the air. Broken equipment still sat on the table. Emily stood there with crossed arms, clearly upset. This is so unfair, she muttered to herself. She hadn't broken anything, she knew that. But none of her classmates spoke up when the principal blamed her, not even her closest friends. A few minutes later, the door opened. Daniel Carter walked in quietly, holding a bucket and cleaning supplies. Emily looked up and sighed. Dad, you don't have to do this. Daniel gave a small smile. Principal Blake asked me to help clean the lab. Emily shook her head. No, she told me to clean it. Daniel gently placed the bucket on the floor. Well, 2 people can finish faster. Emily didn't argue. She grabbed a cloth and started wiping the tables while Daniel swept the floor carefully. For a while, neither of them spoke. Only the sounds of cleaning filled the room. After a few minutes, Emily finally said quietly, I didn't break it. Daniel nodded without looking up. I know. Her hand stopped moving. You believe me? Daniel looked at her with calm eyes. Of course. Emily felt something strange in her chest. All day long, no one had believed her. Not the principal, not her classmates. But her father didn't even hesitate. He just believed her, without proof, without questions. They continued cleaning for another 20 minutes. Finally, the lab looked normal again. Emily leaned against the table, tired. Daniel emptied the dustpan into the trash. Just as they were about to leave, the lab door suddenly opened again. Principal Blake stepped inside. Her sharp eyes quickly scanned the room. Well, at least something got done. She looked directly at Emily. Next time, be more careful. Emily opened her mouth to respond, but Daniel spoke first. It wasn't her fault, ma'am. The room went quiet. Emily stared at him, shocked. Principal Blake raised an eyebrow. Oh? And how would you know that? Daniel stood straight, still respectful but firm. I was cleaning the hallway earlier. I saw another group of students running out of the lab before the glass broke. Emily looked at him. This was the first time she had ever seen her father stand up to someone at school. Principal Blake didn't look convinced. And why didn't you report this earlier? Daniel hesitated for a second. Then he said calmly, "Because I didn't want to cause trouble for the wrong person." The principal stared at him silently. Then she sighed. "Whatever, the lab is clean now." She turned and walked out without another word. The door closed behind her. Emily slowly looked back at her father. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she said softly, "Dad, you didn't have to do that." Daniel simply smiled. "Yes, I did." For the first time that day, Emily didn't feel embarrassed standing next to him. She felt something else, something unfamiliar, something close to respect. But neither of them knew. A much bigger moment was coming soon, one that would change everything between them. That night, the apartment felt quieter than usual. Emily sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, but her mind kept drifting back to the scene in the science lab. Her father standing there, speaking up for her. She had never seen him do that before. Usually, Daniel Carter just stayed quiet at school, accepting whatever people said. But today, he had defended her. Emily looked toward the kitchen. Daniel was washing dishes, humming softly like he always did after dinner, like nothing unusual had happened. She watched him for a moment. His shoulders looked tired. His shirt sleeves were slightly wet from cleaning. For the first time, Emily noticed something she had never paid attention to before. Her father looked exhausted. "Dad?" she called. Daniel turned around. "Yeah?" Emily hesitated. "Why didn't you tell the principal earlier that it wasn't my fault?" Daniel shrugged lightly. "I wasn't completely sure who broke it, but you still defended me." He smiled. "Well, you said you didn't do it." Emily frowned slightly. "That's it? That's enough for me." His answer was simple, too simple. Emily didn't respond. Daniel dried his hands with a towel and walked toward the living room. "You should get some rest," he said gently. "You have classes tomorrow." Emily nodded, but she didn't move. After a few seconds, she said quietly, "Do people treat you like that every day at school?" Daniel looked a little surprised. "Like what?" "Like the way Principal Blake talks to you." He thought for a moment. Then he smiled again. "It's part of the job." Emily didn't like that answer. She had heard the principal speak harshly to him before, but she had always ignored it. Now it felt different. "Doesn't it bother you?" she asked. Daniel sat down across from her. "Not really." Emily raised an eyebrow. "Seriously?" Daniel leaned back in the chair. "I've had worse jobs before." Emily studied his face. For years she had only seen one version of him, the janitor, the quiet man pushing a cart down the hallway. But tonight she was starting to wonder about something else. "Dad, why did you choose to work at my school?" Daniel looked at her for a long second. Then he gave the most honest answer he could. "So I could see you every day." Emily blinked. "You could have worked somewhere else." "That's true. Then why didn't you?" Daniel shrugged. "Because being close to you matters more to me than the job." Emily didn't know what to say. A strange guilt began creeping into her chest. All those times she had asked him to pretend they weren't related. All those times she told him not to call her his daughter. And yet, he chose this job just to stay near her. For the first time in years, Emily Carter started questioning something about herself. Maybe the embarrassment she felt wasn't about her father. Maybe it was about the way she had been treating him. But the real turning point, the moment that would shake her completely, was still coming. And when it arrived, the entire school would witness it. The next morning felt different for Emily. She walked into school like always, surrounded by the usual noise of students talking and lockers slamming. But something inside her had shifted after the conversation with her father. For the first time, she noticed things she had ignored for years, like how early Daniel arrived. While students were still half asleep, he was already mopping the floors. While teachers drank coffee in the staff room, he carried boxes and cleaning supplies from one hallway to another. Most people barely looked at him, Some didn't look at him at all. Emily stood near her locker watching him quietly as he pushed his cart past the corridor. He didn't notice her. And strangely, she felt something heavy in her chest. Just then, a loud voice echoed from the entrance. "Daniel, where are you?" It was Principal Margaret Blake. Students nearby immediately went quiet. Daniel hurried toward her. "Yes, ma'am?" She pointed toward the front hallway where muddy footprints covered the floor. "What is this? I just had this cleaned yesterday." Daniel looked down. "I'll clean it right away." Principal Blake crossed her arms, clearly irritated. "You should have done your job properly the first time." Several students nearby started whispering. Emily stood frozen near her locker. Daniel calmly grabbed his mop. "I'll take care of it, ma'am." But the principal wasn't finished. "Honestly, sometimes I wonder why I keep you here," she said loudly. A few students snickered quietly. Daniel kept his head down and began mopping the floor. Emily felt something twist painfully inside her chest. For years, she had avoided moments like this. Moments where people looked down on her father. That's why she had asked him not to call her his daughter at school, because she didn't want to be part of the embarrassment. But standing there now, watching him quietly accept the humiliation, she suddenly felt ashamed, not of him, but of herself. Principal Blake turned to leave but stopped for one last comment. "And hurry up. You're not paid to stand around." She walked away, her heels clicking loudly across the floor. The hallway slowly returned to normal. Students continued talking and walking to class, but Emily stayed where she was, watching her father. Daniel finished cleaning the muddy footprints and wrung out the mop. Then he straightened his back slowly, clearly tired. For a brief moment he looked up, and his eyes accidentally met Emily's across the hallway. Neither of them moved. Daniel gave the same small smile he always gave her, warm, gentle, like nothing bad had happened, like he didn't want her to worry. That simple smile broke something inside Emily. For the first time, she realized the truth. Her father had never been the embarrassing one. The real shame was the way she had treated the man who had spent his entire life protecting her. And soon, a moment was coming that would push Emily Carter to do something no one in the school expected, something that would leave the entire hallway silent. 2 days later, the entire school gathered in the main auditorium. It was the weekly assembly. Students filled the seats while teachers stood along the walls. On stage, Principal Margaret Blake prepared to give her usual speech about discipline and school rules. Emily sat with her classmates in the middle row. But she wasn't really listening. Her mind kept returning to the same image, her father quietly mopping the floor while students laughed nearby. Something about that moment had stayed with her, something that wouldn't let her ignore the truth anymore. Principal Blake began speaking into the microphone. "Students, respect and responsibility are important values." Suddenly, there was a loud clatter near the side of the stage. Everyone turned. A heavy box of files had slipped from a trolley and scattered across the floor. Standing beside it was Daniel Carter. He quickly bent down, trying to gather the papers before anyone complained. Some students whispered and laughed. "Of course it's the janitor." Emily's chest tightened. She watched her father kneeling on the floor, collecting papers while people stared at him like he didn't matter. And suddenly, she couldn't sit there anymore. Before she even realized what she was doing, Emily stood up. Her classmates looked confused. "Emily, where are you going?" one friend whispered. But she didn't answer. She walked straight down the aisle. Every step felt heavier. Students began murmuring as they watched her approach the stage. Daniel was still picking up the papers when he noticed someone kneel beside him. He looked up. It was Emily. His eyes widened in surprise. "Emily, what are you doing?" She didn't respond. Instead, she helped him gather the remaining papers. Then she slowly stood up. The entire auditorium had gone silent. Emily turned toward the crowd. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her voice was clear when she spoke. "Everyone, this is my dad." Gasps spread across the room, and before Daniel could react, Emily stepped forward and wrapped her arms tightly around him, holding him in front of the entire school. For a few seconds, the entire auditorium stayed completely silent. Hundreds of students and teachers stared at the stage, shocked. No one had expected this. Not the students, not the teachers, and definitely not Daniel Carter. He stood frozen as Emily held him tightly. For years, he had imagined moments where his daughter would proudly call him her father, but he had stopped hoping for it. Yet here she was, holding him in front of everyone. "Emily," he said softly, still confused. "What are you doing?" She slowly pulled back, but her hands were still holding his arms. Her eyes were filled with emotion. "For years," she said, her voice shaking slightly, "I was embarrassed to tell people he was my dad." Students listened quietly. Some looked uncomfortable, some looked ashamed. Emily took a deep breath. "But the truth is, I was wrong." She turned toward her father again. "This man works harder than anyone I know." Daniel tried to interrupt. "It's okay, Emily, you don't have to." But she gently stopped him. "No, I do." She looked back at the crowd. "He wakes up before everyone else. He cleans this school every day. He does all the work people don't even notice." Her voice became stronger. "And he did all of that just so I could study here." The auditorium was completely silent now. Even Principal Margaret Blake stood quietly near the stage, watching. Emily's eyes filled with tears. "And while he was doing everything for me, I kept pretending I didn't know him." She looked directly at Daniel. "I'm sorry, Dad." Daniel felt his chest tighten. He shook his head gently. "You don't have to apologize." But Emily hugged him again, this time even tighter. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. After years of silent heartbreak, those 4 words healed something deep inside him. Slowly, students began clapping. At first it was just a few, then more. Within seconds, the entire auditorium was filled with applause. Some teachers even wiped their eyes. Principal Blake cleared her throat awkwardly and stepped toward the microphone. "Students, today we were reminded of something important." She looked at Daniel for a moment. "Every job deserves respect." Emily was still standing beside her father, but this time she wasn't hiding. She stood proudly next to him, and for the first time in years, Daniel Carter no longer felt invisible. This story teaches us a powerful lesson. Sometimes we become so worried about what people think that we forget to value the people who sacrifice everything for us. Parents often work quietly, facing struggles and disrespect, just to give their children a better life. We should never feel ashamed of the people who love us the most and work the hardest for us. The lesson from this story is simple but powerful. True respect begins at home, and the people who sacrifice for us deserve our pride, not our embarrassment.